20 thought-provoking questions to challenge skeptics and non-believers who use Colossians 2:16-23 to justify Sunday worship instead of the biblical Seventh-day Sabbath. Sabbath and the law of God versus law of Moses. If the 10 Commandments, including the Sabbath, were abolished at the cross, why does the New Testament repeatedly affirm them except for ceremonial laws that pointed to Christ? If Colossians 2:16-23 truly abolished the weekly Sabbath, why did Paul continue to keep it and preach on the Sabbath in Acts 17:2 and Acts 18:4? Why does Hebrews 4:9 say, "There remaineth therefore a rest," Greek sabbatismos, meaning Sabbath-keeping, for the people of God, if the Sabbath was abolished? If the Sabbath was only for Israel, why did God give it to Adam and Eve at creation long before Israel existed, Genesis 2:2-3? Why does Isaiah 66:22-23 prophesy that from one Sabbath to another all flesh shall come to worship in the new heaven and earth if the Sabbath was temporary? Where in the New Testament did Jesus or the apostles command Christians to keep Sunday as the Lord's Day instead of the Sabbath? If the weekly Sabbath was part of the law of Moses and abolished, why does Jesus call himself the Lord of the Sabbath, Mark 2:28, instead of abolishing it? Why does James 2:10-11 affirm that breaking one commandment makes you guilty of all if the 10 Commandments, including the Sabbath, were abolished? Why does the Bible never call Sunday a holy day or command anyone to rest on it? If the Sabbath was nailed to the cross, why do we still see it observed by both Jews and Gentiles throughout the book of Acts, Acts 13:42-44, distinguishing the Sabbath from ceremonial laws? Why does the Bible repeatedly separate the 10 Commandments from the law of Moses? Deuteronomy chapter 4:13-14, Nehemiah chapter 9:13-14, showing they are not the same law. If Colossians 2:16 refers to the weekly Sabbath, why does it list Sabbaths alongside feast days, new moons, and dietary laws, which were part of the ceremonial law, Leviticus 23:37-38? Why does the Sabbath commandment begin with "remember" in Exodus 20:8, while ceremonial laws were only temporary and given later to Israel? Why did God write the 10 Commandments in stone, but tell Moses to write the ceremonial laws in a book, Deuteronomy 31:24-26? Why was the weekly Sabbath called the Sabbath of the Lord, Leviticus 23:3, while ceremonial Sabbaths were called her Sabbaths, Hosea 2:11? If the ceremonial laws were against the people, Deuteronomy 31:26, how could the Sabbath, which was made for man's benefit, Mark 2:27, be part of those laws? Why does Ezekiel 20:12 say the Sabbath is a sign between God and his people forever if it was only a temporary Jewish law? Why does Colossians 2:14 say the handwriting of ordinances was nailed to the cross when the 10 Commandments were written by God's finger and never called ordinances? If the Sabbath was just a Jewish law, why do we see God blessing it before sin existed and calling it a delight for all people, Isaiah 56:6-7? Why did Jesus say in Matthew 24:20, "Pray that your flight be not in winter or on the Sabbath," referring to events decades after his resurrection, if the Sabbath was abolished?